Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for picking up this bill and giving us an opportunity to provide some testimony. We also share the concerns of our colleagues from the Prosecuting Attorneys Association, and we have some concerns that we think need to be addressed in the bill as well. While law enforcement cannot support any legislation that by definition is illegal under federal law due to the classification of marijuana, what we can do is find a position not to oppose having a tough and tight regulatory framework that would be put in place to keep the citizens of Michigan safe. That being said, we strongly believe that an essential piece of the bill needs to be that medical marijuana patients declare at the time of registration whether he or she will obtain their medical marijuana either through a caregiver or a dispensary, but not both. That could be addressed using the registration card, similar as we do with driver's licenses, where we have a horizontal and a vertical card for juvenile and adults. We could have one card for someone who will obtain through a caregiver and the opposite card for someone who's going to obtain through a dispensary. We also think that it's necessary to find a workable, dedicated funding mechanism for local law enforcement agencies. Under the current bill, some limited funds come back to a municipality that we know will quickly be absorbed into the general fund budgets. There are some funds for counties, along with an additional stipend of 5% to county sheriff's departments. We would request that in the bill we identify an additional 5% to be dedicated to local law enforcement, and we would ask that those funds be dedicated as supplemental and not supplanting funds to MCOLs to help provide various training grants that would benefit all of law enforcement, prosecutors, and judges equally. As we see as this medical marijuana moves forward, there'll be additional training needed, particularly in drug recognition experts for our officers on the road to be able to deal with those who may be driving under the influence of medical marijuana. We also think that it's very important to have a dedicated spot on the board for a police chief. We think the perspective of a police chief is extremely important to provide that perspective for the real-world implications and operational concerns as the board goes about its deliberations and decisions. Basically how those decisions will impact, if you will, where the rubber meets the road with our officers out on the streets. Additionally, in the package, we think that we need to ensure the ability of local law enforcement to be able to inspect provisioning centers and other related entities such as the transport agencies, storage, and manufacturing facilities. Also, the current bill provides some provision for labeling, dosage information, and THC levels on medibles. We very strongly believe that these standards also need to be applied to the raw plant-based and smokable forms of marijuana as well. Along with that, we need to take a look at the conversion rates that are included in the bill, where we make the conversion from the 2.5 ounces of usable raw product into the medibles. If you look at the conversions and do the math on the liquids, that conversion would allow someone to possess almost 1.5 gallons of a liquid. In the solid form, where we take 1 ounce of usable marijuana and convert that to solid, someone could have 2.5 pounds of a solid. I'm looking at wondering whether or not it's possible to bake a 2.5 pound brownie that contains more than 2.5 ounces of usable marijuana, and I would say that there is. Those conversions deal strictly with weight. They don't deal with the content, the THC level, the potency of what goes into those. So I'm not sure that is a reasonable conversion to use just weight and volume. Local law enforcement should also have access to any database of licensees so that we're able to quickly and easily confirm an individual's status before we expend a lot of investigative resources, only to find out that this is someone who's a legitimate caregiver or a licensee under the bill. We firmly believe that caregivers should not in any way be allowed to sell any product or excess product to growers or provisioning centers. And finally, changes should be made in the implied consent laws to identify medical marijuana